Hey everyone, my name is Brad, blogger of the Name Investing Doc. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the most expensive bankruptcies for two different physicians and how I decided to deleverage myself from real estate. Follow along with me and we'll talk about it today. The rise in real estate prices in the past 10 years has been pretty much historic. The first person I'd like to talk about in terms of bankruptcies for physicians is Dr. Denton Cooley. Now, I have tons of respect for him, and this is nothing against him as a physician. This is more going to focus on how he over-leveraged himself and ended up having to file bankruptcy. For those of you who are not aware, Dr. Denton Cooley is a cardiothoracic surgeon who really pioneered cardiothoracic surgery. It's said that artificial valve surgery, the complication rate went from 70% down to 6% during the 60s whenever he was doing these cardiovascular procedures. Arguably one of the highest paid doctors at the time. Even despite that, he still found himself in a bunch of financial trouble and had to file bankruptcy where he owed $100 million in 1988 dollars. In 2022 dollars, that would be the equivalent of $250 million bankruptcy. Unfortunately, it looks like he basically had one of the worst timings possible. He predominantly practiced in the Houston area. For those of you not aware about the Houston area, huge oil and gas town, and there's boom or bust. And unfortunately, in the 80s, there was a massive oil bust, one of the most historic ones that even today oil busts are judged up against. Unemployment jumped to 1 in 8 during this time in the 1980s, and vacancy for commercial real estate was over 20%. Before all this happened, there was a huge run-up in prices, and unfortunately, during that run-up in prices is when it seems like Cooley bought a lot of his real estate. For example, he bought this 250-bed hotel and ended up spending a lot of time renovating it. And unfortunately, they finished pouring all this money in renovations right at the peak of the market in the area. By some reports, he was paying $9 million in interest on $50 million in real estate just in the proper Houston metro area, which is a lot of money to pay in interest per year, even for a cardiothoracic surgeon who's making millions of dollars a year doing surgery. Forbes at the time listed him as being worth $40 million, but when you have $100 million worth of real estate and you have 20% vacancies, you have to do what you have to do. So what did Cooley have to say about his bankruptcy? Well, he did say that why should I have to feel disgraced because I'm an amateur investor having met with reverses. What he meant was, looking at the market here, you can see that there's a huge reverse in the amount of money that was flowing into commercial real estate or residential real estate in the Houston metro area. And unfortunately, he just bought right at the peak. More recently, one of the bigger bankruptcies that was listed was Alex Khadavi, a physician out in California who got into renovating and apparently flipping houses, recently filed bankruptcy listing $88 million in debt after building this amazingly large house. Apparently, he spent 3 to 5 times more than he thought it would cost on this house, which he claims led to his bankruptcy. So the reason I'm bringing this up is 2 reasons. One is because things can always get much more irrational. Looking at the graph, you see this huge spike up and you can't help but wonder, is there going to be a huge plummet down? My personal opinion is that until we see job losses, everyone seems to be still meeting their obligations for paying their mortgages. So I don't know if we'll necessarily see this massive crash that some people are predicting, but there'll probably be some degree of correction. In fact, in a lot of markets, including my own, we're seeing this correction now. But the 2008 drop that we saw back then, haven't gotten there yet. And honestly, kind of hope we don't get to that level of drop. In the past couple of years throughout the pandemic, I honestly thought the market would probably go down in the pandemic at the very beginning, and spending would probably go down. There would be job layoffs, but there were a lot of stimulus payments that came with that kept things going. If we look to other markets, like in Canada, for example, or Hong Kong, you see real estate prices that are extremely high compared to the average income. So although it makes me think that it's hard to believe that real estate could get more irrational from where it's at today, other countries seem to suggest that it definitely can get a lot more irrational in certain markets from where it's at today. So what has this meant for me, my practice, and my personal holdings? Well, I was initially going to rent out my house that we just sold, but when I realized I could take the tax-free gains and roll that into the new house, I decided to take that rather than taking the maybe $1,500 a month in extra payments that I would get on this house. And I just took a step back and realized that too much of my net worth is tied up in real estate. And if real estate goes south, I don't want to end up over leveraged, and I got to diversify my assets. So I ended up diversifying in the sense that we're not buying a location for our second clinic location. We're going to rent from there. And then I also sold my other house when I bought my new house. That way I don't have a significant portion of my money in real estate. I know it's a little bit more of a brief video, but I want to talk about leverage, real estate. And I know that real estate's extremely popular, but looking at the graph, just be cautious when you're in real estate. Things could always get much more irrational, but we could always see things go south really, really quick. Good luck. Hope you all have a good day. See y'all next week.